Greetings, we are the Ministry of the Real Truth. This video is titled Adamites and Pre-Adamites, a popular discussion. To some this may be upsetting because it is very one-sided, and we believe could be racist. But in relation to this video that we found, a theory you've never heard of, a TED talk by Michael Robinson, where he says that there was lost white tribes all over the world, and it shows on a map of the world where these supposed tribes could be located or were located, and one of them was New Zealand. So it could be hinting at that there was a white or lost white tribe in New Zealand before the Maori or the Chinese, whoever other people in the comments say, according to an Australian named Smith, that were there, or others. They could have been there before them, right? Now, this is this guy's TED talk, so this is his research. He's an expert in his field. So it's very interesting. You can watch it. It's quite long. Oh, it's not that long. It's only 17 minutes long. But our main concern here is this: the Adamites and pre-Adamites, because we did come across someone in a religious chat room, on a chat site, social chat site, that was a member of or a supporter of Christian identity, and sometimes he'd spin off about different races and all this sort of stuff, being of that movement, which we didn't really agree with. And then he'd quote the Bible, saying, well, Mamza, or this particular word in the Hebrew, actually refers to mongrels, people not of that pure European race, mixed bloods, etc. Whereas we found that that Hebrew word actually means those born of the forbidden marriage, or wedlock, out of wedlock, or incest. So he was completely wrong. He said he was of the pure race and all this sort of stuff. He did a DNA test. So he asked him, okay, can you give us some evidence? And he says, oh, what for? Got quite upset. He says, well, you're making a statement, friend. Back it up, You can cover up your name and stuff, blot out your name, whatever. No one needs to know that, but just give us the evidence that you have perfect DNA, as you claim, right? But he wouldn't do it. He couldn't do it. So anyway, the Christian identity movement goes on about this a lot: Adamites and the pre-Adamites, and those who are not Adamites. So this is the book that we came across about 5 or 10 minutes ago, called Adamites and Pre-Adamites, or a popular discussion concerning the remote representation of the human species and their relation to the biblical Adam, by Alexander Winchell, LL.D., Professor of Geology and Zoology in Syracuse University, and of Historical Geology and Zoology in the Vanderbilt University. Originally published in the Northern Christian Advocate, about 1878 or later. So we had to check out who this guy was, and here's a short page of information on him, Alexander Winchell, and it says, don't be confused, or don't get confused with Alexander Newton Winchell, who was an American geologist who pioneered a spectroscopic and X-ray crystallographic studies on minerals. He wrote an influential textbook, The Element of Optical Mineralogy, which went into several editions. So don't get confused between this guy, Alexander Newton Winchell, and this guy, Alexander Winchell, born December 31, 1824, died February 19, 1891. He was a United States geologist who contributed to this field mainly as an educator and a popular lecturer and author. His views on evolution aroused controversy among his contemporaries, Today, the racism of these views is more cause for comment. Here's his biography. Here's all the contents, and here's his biography. Education: he graduated from the Wesleyan University of Middletown, Connecticut in 1847. There's a little history of it. Wesleyan, probably after Wesley, the famous preacher. He taught at Pennington Male Seminary, etc. He was elected, okay, it says here, he then taught at Pennington Male Seminary of New Jersey, Amenia Seminary of New York, where he had previously been a student, an academy in New Bern, Alabama, and the Mesopotamian Female Seminary of Utor, it'd be in Alabama, in the States, the last one which was founded by him. He became president of the Masonic University, make note of this, at Selma, Alabama. Isn't that where Martin Luther King did his walk through, right, amidst all that racism and stuff like that? Pretty sure that's the same place. And that's what that movie Selma was based around, his walk through there. Okay, so he became president of the Masonic University at Selma, Alabama in 1853. He was elected as a member of the American Philosophical Society in 1865. And what is that? Founded in 1743 in Philadelphia, is a scholarly organization that promotes knowledge in the sciences and humanities through research, professional meetings, publications, library resourcing, etc. Okay, he entered the service of the University of Michigan as Professor of Physics, etc. Professor of Geology and Paleontology at Michigan, and so forth. Okay, he took up a lease on cotton plantation near Vicksburg, Mississippi, under a plan devised by General Lorenzo Thomas to lease plantations along the Mississippi River to lure men from the north who would hire black labourers on terms prescribed by the Army. Winchell organised the Ann Arbor Cotton Company and sold stock to the university's president, whereupon he received a leave of absence to engage in cotton planting and so forth. Needless to say, the venture brought him nothing but problems, and after Winchell returned to Michigan in 1864, his brother Martin, who was managing the plantation, was killed by guerrillas. They used to undertake guerrilla warfare, not actually guerrillas, as in apes. Syracuse University. In 1872, he was appointed Chancellor of Syracuse University. The Depression of 1873 affected both his personal finances and those of Syracuse, and these troubles led him to resign this position in 1874. Late career in controversy. In 1875, he worked as a professor of geology and zoology at Vanderbilt University. There, his views on evolution, as expressed in his book Adamites and Pre-Adamites, or a popular discussion, 1878, were not acceptable to the university administration because they diverged from biblical teaching. Today, the views on the inferiority of the Negro, quote from his 1878 book, would probably have been the focus of controversy. In any case, he was obligated to resign in 1878. He then returned to the University of Michigan, where he was professor of geology and paleontology. His work in geology was not so significant as his teaching. I need to find your glasses to see something. In popular lectures and writing in this field, he was much concerned with reconciling science and religion. He was an advocate of theistic evolution. What is that? Theistic evolution, also known as theistic evolutionism or God-guided evolution, is a general term comprising views that regard religious teachings about God as compatible with modern scientific understanding about biological evolution. I'm not too sure what that continues to say. Something about theistic evolution is not, whatever that is. We might have a look at that in a minute. Okay, we might actually have a look at that. We'll copy and paste in. That's it, actually going here by clicking it for different reasons. So we're going to have a look at that. Click on that to see what it actually says about theistic. Where is it? Way down here somewhere. Okay. Theistic evolution, also known as theistic evolution or God-guided evolution, is a general term comprising views that regard religious teachings about God as compatible with modern scientific understanding about biological evolution. Theistic evolution is not in itself a scientific theory, but a range of views about how the science of general evolution relates to religious beliefs in contrast to special creation views. Because the evolution theory, when it first started off as a hypothesis, an idea, then a hypothesis, becomes a theory, or became a theory, and then it led to it being a scientific theory, and as others that are right into that evolution theory will get most upset if you don't believe in it as a scientific theory. They will state it's a scientific fact, even though these scientists will say, well, Darwin was actually incorrect here and there and here. They'll still try and say, oh yeah, okay, it started off as a hypothesis, or an idea and a hypothesis, then it became a theory, and then it became a scientific theory, and then it became a fact. You know? And you don't know what you're talking about. That sort of stuff, right? Okay, so theistic evolution is not in itself a scientific theory, but a range of views about how the science of general evolution relates to religious beliefs in contrast to special creation views. Theistic evolutionists accept the scientific consensus on the age of the Earth. I wonder if they say how old it is. 4.54 plus 0.05 billion years. And so it's mathematics there. Okay. Calculating to go there with it. The age of the universe, the Big Bang, the origin of the solar system, the origin of life and evolution. Supporters of theistic evolution generally attempt to harmonize evolutionary thought with belief in God, rejecting the conflict thesis regarding the relationship between religion and science. They hold that religious teachings about creation and scientific theories of evolution need not contradict each other. Okay, we did a video on the native-born Aramaic speaking translator Victor N. Alexander and his theory of the Aborigine, because he found that when he translated the original ancient, very old Brita of the Lishana Atika Sapreya, the language of God, the old scribal, sacred scribal tongue or language of the Tab Ashrit, right? Copied by monks and scribes around about 800 BCE, etc. That he was quite surprised that they actually spoke about a pre-Adamic man, the Neanderthal man, and it agreed with science. Okay, these biblical texts, these manuscripts, scriptures within it, agreed with the scientific archaeological discoveries. But it didn't agree with evolution, because evolution keeps changing its claims all the time, right? Okay. It's not really fixed. That's the impression that we get with the evolution, Charles Darwin's evolution, theory of evolution. Okay, so that's basically what that is. Supporters of theistic evolution generally attempt to harmonize evolutionary thought with belief in God, rejecting the conflict thesis, a historiographical approach in the history of science that originated in the 19th century with John William Draper and Andrew Dickson White. It maintains that there is an intrinsic intellectual conflict between religion and science. Okay, regarding the relationship between religion, the relationship between religion and science involves discussions that interconnect the study of the natural world, history, philosophy, and theology, even though the ancient and medieval worlds did not have conceptions resembling those. Okay. They hold that religious teachings about creation and scientific theories of evolution need not contradict each other. Okay, it's got some definitions. Francis Collins describes theistic evolution as a position that evolution is real, but that it was set in motion by God, and characterises it as accepting that evolution occurred as biologists describe it, but under the direction of God. Yeah, if he's the God of everything, right, then yeah, maybe he'd have some part in that, right? He lists 6 general premises on which different versions of theistic evolution typically exist. They include the prevailing cosmological model and so forth, with the universe coming into being about 13.8 billion years ago. The fine-tuned universe, evolution and natural selection. It's part of that evolution theory, isn't it? Charles Darwin's evolution theory, and so forth. More information here. Others argue that one should read the creation story in the book of Genesis only metaphorically. Don't take it seriously, don't take it literally. Others see evolutionary creation, also referred to by some observers as evolutionary criticism, creationism, as the belief that God as creator uses evolution to bring about his plan. The Jesuit paleontologist Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, 1888-1955, was an influential proponent of God-directed evolution, or orthogenesis, in which man will eventually evolve to the omega point of union with the creator. Eugenie Scott states in Evolution versus Creationism that is a type of evolution rather than creationism, despite its name, and that is hardly distinguishable from theistic evolution and so forth. Historical development. Historians of science and authors of pre-evolutionary ideas have pointed out that scientists had considered the concept of biological change well before Darwin. More information. Jens Christian Clausen, 1967, refers to Linnaeus' theory as a forgotten evolutionary theory that antedates Darwin's by nearly 100 years, and reports that he was a pioneer in doing experiments about hybridization. And later observations by Protestant botanists Carl Friedrich von Gartner and Joseph Gottlieb Kuhlreuter, here's information here, denied the immutability of species, which the Bible never teaches, and so forth. There's others here that have been mentioned. On the Origin of Species, sort of about Charles Darwin when he published the book on the Origin of Species in 1859. Many liberal Christians accepted evolution provided they could reconcile it with divine design, or mix the two together, right? Yeah. If they didn't accept something in there, or they saw something in there, they can fit it into God's creation, the Genesis story, etc. Lots of information there. Okay, and Darwin saying something there. Darwin himself, in his second edition of The Origin of Species, January 1860, had written in the conclusion that he believed that animals have descended from at most only 4 or 5 progenitors, and plants from an equal or lesser number. Analogy would lead him to one step further, namely to the belief that all animals and plants have descended from some one prototype. Doesn't Genesis say God planted the trees, etc., from their own kind, and then they gave off seed and reproduced more trees and fruit from their kind, right? But an analogy may be a deceitful guide. Nevertheless, all living things have much in common in their chemical composition, their germinal vesicles, their cellular structure, and their laws of growth and reproduction. He states, we see this even in so trifling a circumstance as that the same poison often similarly affects plants and animals, or that the poison secreted by the gallfly produces monstrous growth on the wild rose or oak tree. Darwin states here he should infer from analogy that probably all the organic beings which have ever lived on this earth have descended from some one primordial form into which life was first breathed by the Creator. Huh? What Creator? A creator deity or creator God. Okay. A deity or God responsible for the creation of the earth. So he had his theory but he still hung on to that there was a creator. And it comes from chapter 14, Conclusions, page 428. You can check out that book to see if he actually said that. Sometimes people add bits and pieces, they rewrite it and make out, yeah, Charles Darwin said that, Therefore he was, still believed in the creator, had his Christian ideals, all that sort of stuff. He clung to those. Because apparently he was probably religious, supposedly religious when he started off, but maybe his wife died or something like that, and he just changed his mind, like maybe he had that hurt that she died or something, Who knows? Go read into Charles Darwin, but that's what we've come to presume. Because he's always like, why does somebody start off being God, into God, go to church, all that sort of stuff, believing in him, and then suddenly they change, maybe something in their life, in the environment or their life happens, right? Like they lose a loved one, they're so hurt that they abandon God altogether. Like it's not yet a brother-in-law, but he really dislikes God and all that pertains to him because his 2 dogs he loved very, very much, because he had them since they were small and he was young. They both died, and his mother died, etc., like that. So he blames, God. He says, why did God take my mother, and all that sort of stuff. And 2 dogs. Okay, sometimes people think along those lines. Anyway, so there's more information there. We're going to go switch over to the actual book. As we said, we first heard about these Adamites and pre-Adamites, etc., from a guy in a religious social chat site, because he was part of that Christian identity church movement, and he used to quote all this biased, racist stuff all the time, right? Like he'd say the N-word, and then he'd say, next time he'd say, how you doing, buddy? Because we sort of had the same, some similar ideas, not these racial things, but so like discuss, like he'd say, it says in the Bible about mongrels, mamsers, whatever, then it means this and it means that, and it's like, we go check it out, and we find, no, that's not actually what it says in that Hebrew, if that's what he's quoting, right? That it says that in Hebrew, that mongrels, they're this, they're that, right? Not very nice words. So it's confronts him again and says, no, that's not actually what it says. He says, you just don't know, that's all. That's what it actually means. But we found that one of the leaders of that movement referred to them as bastards, etc., and being mixed races and all that sort of stuff. He referred to Mamsa as bastards. So everybody took that on board when it didn't actually mean that, well, I wasn't referring to that, right? Could that word actually be in that sense right, of those born out of wedlock, a forbidden marriage, or incest? Yeah, there's a fine line, so you decide, you figure it out, because we don't want to. Actually, we might look at that word. What is a. Yeah, because we have a slight confusion here at this moment, so we'll have a look at that. What does it mean when you say that to somebody? They are bastards. Okay, a child born to parents who are not married to each other. Something that is spurious, irregular, inferior, or of questionable origin. So, this person's claim that it's the mixed breeds, the hybrids, half. So if you're half African and half European, then you're a bastard. Bastard is an insulting word which some people use about a person who has behaved very badly or something like that. A way to insult another person in a vulgar way, a child born without wed parents. Okay, so it could also refer to that. Britannica Dictionary, a very bad or unpleasant man, a man who you strongly dislike or hate, you dirty so-and-so. Okay, there's plenty more definitions there. So what we're going to do is we're going to compare that with Mamza from the Hebrew. Mamza. Okay. Mamzer in the Hebrew Bible and Jewish religious law. A mamzer, here is in Hebrew, literally a strange person. Plural mamzerim, is a person who is born as a result of certain forbidden relationships or incest as it is defined by the Bible, or the descendant of such a person. Okay, as we said, it's a forbidden marriage or incest. It would be a forbidden marriage between a member of the house of Israel and some non-member, okay, some foreigner, some Gentile. The Hebrew word mamzer appears once in the Torah. A mamzer shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. Even the 10th generation shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. Okay. A stranger or outsider. Okay, so is that saying a non-house of Israel or a non-Jew? A child born of a forbidden union, a sexual union. Although commonly translated as bastard, the term is defined in rabbinic literature as a child born of the incest or adultery. Traditional Jewish law prohibits a mamzer from marrying into the Jewish community, a restriction that poses a significant ethical quandary. Okay, so that's what it means there. It's probably nothing to do with mixed blood. Here we go here. Who is a mamzer? Aish.com. A child is a mamzer if he is the result of relations with a Jewish man. That a Jewish woman is forbidden to marry, e.g. the result of incest or an adulterous affair. A child that was born to an unmarried woman is simply considered a child born out of wedlock and is not a mamzer. Okay, but if she was married at the time, she played around, then she's a mamzer. Okay, here's another one. The word mamzer is understood by the rabbis as bastard, but not in the sense that is generally used in modern English. Rather, by rabbinical definition, a mamzer refers to the child or parents who violated one or more of the laws of Leviticus 18 or Leviticus 20. While conceiving the child, these can generally be referred to as the laws of incest and adultery. And you obviously see you got Strong's Hebrew. Okay, late Hebrew idiom, see Levi. Incest, Aramaic loanword, so they borrowed it from the Aramaic. To perhaps figurative collective of mixed population. So that might be a non-Jew or House of Israel member. Okay, at base, a mamzer was a product of a union that was forbidden because the couple was not permitted to marry and procreate according to the Torah. Okay, referring to mamzer, then bastard, which perhaps better convey the sense. I'll go back here somewhere. At base, a mamzer was a product of a union that was forbidden because the couple was not permitted to marry and procreate according to the Torah. Whatever became of the man and woman as a result of their sexual contact, their offspring was what we call a changeling or mixling, terms which perhaps better convey the sense of mamzer than bastard or mongrel, as the Christian identity movement refer to it as. Plenty more definitions there. Okay, what does it say here? In the Hebrew Bible and Jewish religious law, a mamzer is a person. We'll go look at Wikipedia, right? Go deep into this definition to clear it up. In the Hebrew Bible and Jewish religious law, a mamzer, is the Hebrew there, a strange person, plural mazmerim, is a person who is born as a result of certain forbidden relationships or incest as it is defined by the Bible, or the descendant of such a person. Mamzer status, mam zerut, is not synonymous with the traditional Western definition of illegitimacy. Western common law states the status of a child born to parents who are legally married to each other, and of a child conceived before the parents obtain a legal divorce. Conversely, illegitimacy, also known as bastardy, and so forth, since it does not include children whose mothers were unmarried when they were born. Etymology: some have explained the word mamzer as a masculine noun form derived from the root mza. This is a trilateral rule. right? Both in the Hebrew, possibly the Aramaic, and the Arabic, having a meaning of spoil or corrupt. According to Strong's Concordance, from an unused root meaning to alienate. So they were like shushud, kept separate. Okay? A mongrel, i.e. born of a Jewish father and a heathen mother. So that's someone who's a pagan. Okay? A foreigner, a Gentile. The Talmud explains the term homiletically as consisting of the words mum or mum, defect, and zah, mumzai, strange alien, a euphemism for an illicit union in the person's lineage. Hebrew Bible usage. The term occurs twice in the Hebrew Bible. The first time is Deuteronomy 23:3, 23:2 in non-Hebrew versions. So it'd be Americanized English Bible versions probably. The Septuagint translates the term mamzer as son of a prostitute. Greek ek pornes, in the Latin Vulgate translated as descorto natus, or natus born of a prostitute in English. Yeah, because this Latin adopted the Greek, and that's where you get that Latinized form of Greek from. Okay. In English it is translated as bastard. A bastard mamzer shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord, even to his 10th generation shall he not enter into the congregation of the Lord. Deuteronomy 23:2. Shall not enter the congregation of the Lord, explained by the rabbis to mean that the bastard cannot marry a son or daughter of Israel. Yeah? He's an outsider. And he's born illegitimately, all that sort of stuff. Alternatively, the congregation of the Lord can refer to the legislature of ancient Israel. The other occasion is in Zechariah 9:6, and a bastard mamzer shall dwell in Ashdod, a seaport. Okay, so that's way away from Israel, is it? Halachic definitions. In the Talmud, the term mamzer is applied to the descendants of specific illicit, or quite illegal, unquote, right? Not allowed. According to the Mishnah, a mamzer is the offspring of a biblically forbidden union, for which its progenitors are liable, to be its parents, to extirpation. What's that? The Hebrew term karath, or extirpation, is a form of punishment for sin mentioned in the Hebrew Bible and later Jewish writings. In the Talmud, kareth means not cutting necessarily. What? In the Talmud, kareth means not necessarily physical cutting off of life, but can also mean the extinction of the soul in denial or something. Okay. Okay, and we're going to read that. So it's different explanations of it. What's this? There are two categories of mamzerim. A child born of incest as defined by the Bible is a mamzer. Note, however, that an incestuous relationship between one or two non-Jews cannot produce a mamzer, and if the product of such a union were to convert, he or she would be equal of any Jew. Is that real? Is that for real? Maybe some Jews out there can say, yeah, it is, but maybe they can say, no, it isn't. Whoever wrote this doesn't know what they're talking about. It seems kind of weird if you have this kind of relationship. You know, if it's a Levitical law or something, wouldn't they like be punished or stoned to death or something? Not really sure on that one. Okay. I don't know if the Bible actually talks about that. That a father should get with his daughter or whatever, you know. I don't know if it's got some sort of law against that. What's God's view on that? We know what today's law's view on that is, right? Even though they probably are practices of it, you know, secret societies, all that sort of stuff. So it's been said. So that relationship between one or two non-Jews cannot produce a mamzer. If the product of such a union were to convert, to Judaism, etc., he or she would be the equal of any Jew. Okay. A child born of a married Jewish woman's adultery is a mamzer. The child of a single woman and a man she could lawfully have married is not a mamzer. Born out of wedlock, right? It is irrelevant if the man is married or not. If one of the parents is not Jewish, the child is not a mamzer. You know, we read earlier that that person outside was. A foreigner was. Any child born to a married woman, even if she is known to have been unfaithful, is presumed to be her husband's, unless she is so promiscuous that such a presumption becomes unsupportable, or if she enters a public relationship with another man. It's kind of weird. She's mucked around, she got pregnant to some other guy, and it's presumed to be her husband's. Okay, they're just sort of making an assumption or presuming that's her husband's, unless she is so, or proven so promiscuous that such a presumption becomes unsupportable, or if she's caught entering a public relationship with another man or something like that, or it's realised, right? Lots of other stuff here. Okay. According to Orthodox Judaism and so forth, Conservative Judaism, Karaite Judaism, Israeli law. In the modern state of Israel, the law concerning matters of marriage, divorce and personal status is partially under the jurisdiction of religious courts, etc. Okay. So here, if it's... We did come across something years ago that says the people in Israel can't call themselves Israelites because they're not real Jews. They're like Khazarians, all this stuff, you know, that conspiracy theory stuff, that the European Jews, the Khazarians had the Crusaders on the border, threatening them to invade them, and then Mohammedans on the right, or Islam, invading them. So the king had to make this choice. If I go with the Crusaders, or these others on the left attacking us, whoever they really were, then they will get, they'll come down on us hard because, Islam or Mohammedans will come down hard on us for converting to Christianity, right? So if Islam came in, invaded, and then converted all to Islam, right? Then if these other ones on the left were Crusaders and they came in, they'd come down heavier on these people because they converted to Islam. Okay. There's a fight between the two. They're stuck between two powers, right? Two invaders. So this king apparently says, I love my people, whatever. So he decided to be neutral. And apparently there's quite a few Jews living in their land, and they like the idea of their traditions, their religion, whatever, right? So apparently he went neutral. He thought this was the best way, and he embraced their religion, right? So either parties, left or right, they had no just cause to give them a hard time because they hadn't converted to anybody, right? Whether they were the Crusaders and their Christianity, or the Mohammedans or Islam and their Quran, etc. So they adopted it, and then they got, because they were pretty powerful, they're like some area in Russia, big like that, right? Really powerful. But then they got invaded or something, and something happened, and they all spread out across the planet, and all this sort of stuff. Having those Jewish, the Jewish religion, the text, everything like that, right, related to it. So they became, quote, Jews, unquote, when they weren't actually like the original Jews, say from Judea, etc., etc. They ended up in the state of Israel, apparently. So there's Khazarian Jews. So apparently some religious council there. You have to do your personal research on this, on that. It's fact, because we read this years ago, right? That they couldn't call themselves Israelites because they weren't originally from the house of Israel, that line, that lineage. So those 96%ers supposedly aren't true Jews or true Israelites, right? True Jews or Israelites. But there's 4% in there that if they could get hold of those records, some say they can, others say no, they can't, because Titus invaded Jerusalem and burnt everything. He burnt those records, right? Okay. So these people are still trying to say, well, we can get those records of these 4%ers that will verify that we are actually of that true Jewish lineage. Okay, so here's a connection with French medieval names. A persistent etymology of the surname Manster is connected to Hebrew Mamzer. Supposedly, Ebellus of Aquitania, Count of Poitou and Duke of Aquitania, 879-35, had the nickname Mansa or Mensa, as he is known to have been a bastard and reputed to have had a Jewish mother. This nickname is considered to be derived from Mansa. A similar explanation is offered also for the same nickname as used by another prince from Occitania, now Mansa. Is that French or something? I don't know what that is. Okay, he's a friar, maybe. A 10th century Count of Angoulême, who also was a bastard. William the Conqueror may have been referred to as Bastardas and Memsa. Okay, this is the one who got the arrow in his eye? Yeah, I think they had a battle with one of the Henrys or something. Can't really remember. Not really sure. Haven't read that history on him for ages, but yeah, one of them, I think it might have been him, got an arrow in his eye during the battle. Okay, so yeah, go do your personal research. Don't take our word for it, but that's just what we've read over the years. Yeah, there's always two sides to a coin. It's just Nathan confronts King David for his adultery with Bathsheba, an affair that produced a Mamsa bronze bas relief on the door of La Madeleine, Paris. Didn't he send one of his troops or something, or one of his soldiers to battle to have him deliver, say, die, and he'd be able to have his wife, something like that, and then repented of it later on? Don't know who Bathsheba was. Was she Egyptian or something? The wife of Uriah the Hittite and later of David, according to the Hebrew Bible. She was the mother of Solomon, who succeeded David as king, making her the Geburah. She is best known for the biblical narrative, or that biblical narrative. Okay. Hang on, where was she from again? She's the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Okay. Yeah, I'm not too sure if might have been somebody else. Might have been someone else in regards to David that he sent to the battlefront, knowing that he'll get killed, and then he took his wife. You have to look up that scripture, check it out for yourself, right? And all that sort of stuff. All this information here, right? All the references. Okay. Okay. So yeah, this guy here, his book was deemed racist, so I have a look at it. Okay, Adamites and pre-Adamites, popular discussion, the remote representation of the human species in their relation to the biblical Adam, Alexander Winchell, LLD. Okay, Adamites and pre-Adamites, chapter 1, a sagacious Dutchman. In 1655, a small book appeared in Paris which had for its title the unheard of subject, Pre-Adamites. Supposedly in the Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian books, right? They call them cuneiform clay tablets. The tablets with the clay tablets with cuneiform on them. When translated, this is basically what they're talking about, pre-Adamites. Or Adamites, perfect beings. Yeah, that was the term. Adamites, usually spelled with two A's. Adamites. They were the perfected beings. And one of them we came across, apparently Adam was all alone. As in the Bible, Genesis actually says he was all alone and needed help. And he was doing these wayward things with the beasts of the field, right? And that's what this Christian identity guy calls anyone that's of mixed blood, not of that perfect DNA European race or whatever, the beasts of the field, right? Which is totally wrong. That this Adamite perfected being was doing the dandy with these animals because he had no partner, right? And these gods, mythical gods, says, what the hell are you doing? You're a perfected being, stop that. And then they created a female for him, companion. It was written in Latin. The small book appeared in Paris, which had for its title the unheard of subject, Pre-Adamites. It was written in Latin, and its full title was as follows: Pre-Adamite, whatever that Latin says. We're not the Pope, so we don't know what the hell we're talking about, how to pronounce it. Looks like it says pre-Adamite. I'm not sure what this is. It's the Apostle Paul, is it? Not really sure it is. In Roman. No idea. Pre-human being. And the Adamite condition. Or the condition of Adam, something like that. I'm not really sure. Wild guess. The book appeared anonymously, and those acquainted with the spirit of the dominant ecclesiasticism of that date will readily divine the motive of its author. It very soon became known, however, that it was written by La Peyrere, however you say it, no idea, a Dutch ecclesiastic whose name was Latinized, when Latinized was Peireus. The work was an attempt to prove from biblical authority that men must have lived on the earth before Adam. Yeah, Neanderthal men. Within a year appeared its complement from the pen of the same author, in which the whole subject was newly argued and more thoroughly discussed. This was a theological system based on the hypothesis of pre-Adamites. The two works may now occasionally be found in one volume. The Syracuse University possesses a copy. The following year a book appeared in London, the title of which is a literal translation of that of Pre-Adamite, but it includes also the Systema Theologicum of Peireus. In the undeveloped stage of scientific inquiry, existing 2.25 centuries ago, it is certain that no investigation respecting pre-Adamites could have been conducted on true anthro... Went the wrong way. Actually went too far ahead now. Oh my gosh, what happened here? So I only went to that page. Oh, something anthro... What the hell? What happened to that part we were looking at? Conducted on true anthro... Nothing there. Okay, so where did that page go? Where did it go? Okay. Cut. Take 2 on that one. Adamites and pre-Adamites. Chapter 1, a sagacious... Take 2. Adamites and pre-Adamites. Chapter 1, a sagacious Dutchman. Sagacious. Cut. Take 3. Adam and pre-Adamites. Chapter 1, a sagacious Dutchman. In 19... Oh my gosh. Cut. Adamites and pre-Adamites. Chapter 1, a sagacious Dutchman. In 1655, a small book appeared in Paris, which had for its title the unheard of subject pre-Adamites. It was written in Latin, and its full title was as follows. I'm not even going to attempt that Latin, but it looks like it's something to do with pre-Adamites, the condition of Adam prior or primary humans or first humans before Adam. Something like that. This book appeared anonymously, and those acquainted with the spirit of the dominant ecclesiasticism of that date will readily divine the motive of its author. It very soon became known, however, that it was written by... Cut. Okay, there's information here on when this book was first... Cut. Take 6. Adamite and pre-Adamites, and there's some information here on when this book... Cut. 7. Adamites... Cut. Take 7. Adamites and pre-Adamites. There's a chapter here on when this book, or a small book... Cut. Jeez. Get it right. Take 8. Adamites and pre-Adamites. And this is a introduction to this book. Chapter 1, a sagacious Dutchman. And it speaks of a small book in 1655 that appeared in Paris, which had for its title the unheard of subject pre-Adamites. It was written in Latin, and its full title was as follows. There it is there. It's quite a long Latin title. The book appeared anonymously, and those acquainted with the spirit of the dominant ecclesiasticism of that date or readily divine the motive of its author. It very soon became known, however, that it was written by some French guy, or a Dutch guy, ecclesiastic, whose name, when Latinized, was Pairerius. This work was an attempt to prove, from biblical authority, that men must have lived on the earth before Adam, yet Neanderthal men, the first humans that God created in the Brita, or Genesis, that we put a video about, on, okay, that subject. Within a year appeared as complement from the pen of the same author, in which the whole subject was newly argued and more thoroughly discussed. This was a theological system based on the hypothesis of pre-Adamites. The two works may now occasionally be found in one volume. The Syracuse University possesses a copy. The following year a book appeared in London, the title of which is a literal translation of that of Pre-Adamite, but it also includes the Systema Theologicum of Pairerius. In the undeveloped stage of scientific inquiry existing 2¼ centuries ago, it is certain that no investigation respecting pre-Adamites could have been conducted on true anthro. And what we found with this page is there must be a page missing or something, because it doesn't continue this word here. Okay. And it just says of its thing. So we're guessing that was anthropathy, or what do we call it? Yeah, I think it's missing a page. I'm sure it's missing a page. We'll go back just to check that out. See, what's it? Doesn't tell you the page number. I guess that's page 1. And there's nothing there, and it says of its thing, so it wouldn't make sense, would it? 6. Adam was the first man, only in the same sense as Christ was the second man, for Adam was the figure of Christ. Verse 14 in Genesis, I guess, Genesis 1:14. Although men are of one blood in the sense of one substance, one matter, human beings were all made from the earth, the dust, the ground, right? According to the book of Genesis. The Jews are descended from Adam, the Gentiles from pre-Adamites. Okay, so the Jews are descended from Adam, the human beings made of the dust, the ground, the earth, while the Gentiles are from pre-Adamites. So they're saying that everyone else is, let's say, possibly from the Neanderthal man, okay, or some alien source, or alien extraterrestrial planet or something like that, as far as those conspiracy theories, etc., go. Right, well, we bring you that video on the Neanderthal man being the first created in God's image from the Brita of the Lishana Artica Suprae, or the of the Tav Asheret, where it's translated, and it says God made these beings first, these human beings first, who were Neanderthal man. They had the breath of life, they were a soul, they became a living soul, they went from inanimate to animate, but they didn't have the Spirit of God. And then the second stage was to create man in his likeness from the dust, from the ground. Okay, Adam and then Eve, who had the same breath of life. They looked like God, they had his face, whatever, resembled him. They went from inanimate souls to animate souls, or living souls, right? And they had that Spirit of God in them, so that's how they could correspond with God, walk with God, talk with God, etc. Right? So then they knew when they fell, good and evil, right? Sin, all that sort of stuff. Whereas that Neanderthal man was just basically following his animal instincts. Okay? He has a soul, he has the life, he has the soul, but he doesn't have that Spirit of God, so that's why he follows his animal instinct. Okay, so it says here, the Gentiles were created Aborigines. Remember we explained that in the other video? Those who clung to their indigenous roots, etc. Okay? in that Brita or Genesis video that we did. In the beginning, by the word of God, in all lands, Adam, the father of the Jews, was formed of clay by the hand of God. That's what we stated. It was found in that Brita or Genesis, right? Genesis, after the first chapter, is a history, not of the first men, but of the first Jews. The existence of pre-Adamites is also indicated in the biblical account of Adam's family, especially of Cain, who found a wife amongst some older peoples that went forth in fear of violence from strange hands. Didn't we explain all that through that particular video? He went into another land, but before he went, he says, "Oh, it's bad enough, God. Yeah, I did what I did. I killed my brother. You know, I'm going to have to live with that. Consequences, whatever. Right? But it's bad enough. It's even worse that I'm like away from your presence, your midst. Okay, hidden from you, whatever. And then you send me into this other land of Nod. He was afraid that someone will fight. If someone found him, they'll kill him. So God puts a sign on him: don't touch Cain or us. You know." What's it like? 7-fold punishment, payback for whoever kills Cain. So he goes into this land of the east because they keep heading east. Right? The biblical text is saying east, east, east. So he goes there, finds himself a wife. But it's like we ask the question, like, what the? How? If there's only Adam and Eve, Cain kills Abel, right? There's no other human beings created, only those three, right? And then had sons, daughters, whatever, right? According to the Bible, according to these churches, these pastors, whatever, they insist that that's what the Bible says. So don't say anything else, right? Who are you? You don't know nothing. You're only a new Christian. You're on milk. We're on the meat. All this sort of stuff. As they term it, and they come down hard on you if you think. But hang on, science, archaeology, whatever, has proven that there was a pre-Adamic man. No, don't believe that rubbish. There's no evidence of all that sort of stuff. They're trying to instill on you what they have read or what they tell you it says, okay, on the surface, and how do you go deep? Okay, basically. Okay, so that's basically it. That there's some other pre-Adamic man, human being before Adam, okay, and then there's these other people in this land of Nod, okay, and he finds a wife there. He didn't take his sister or anything, because it doesn't say while God and Cain were talking. Adam and Eve got together again, and had children in between their conversation. It wasn't until Cain went into the other land of Nod that it tells you that they got together again and they had a replacement child, because Cain killed Abel. So they had, what's his name, Seth? Was it Seth first? Or Enosh? Seth. Yeah, it must have been Seth. Which Shet, S-H-E-H-T in the Aramaic, which means gained. Because Eve stated she gained another child or another man from God because Cain killed Abel. Right? The other one. So he goes into the land and he finds him a wife. Okay, if there's only Adam and Eve, who was his wife that he found, right? Probably a Neanderthal. And that leads up to the revealing of the hybridization of the children of God that left their rightful place with these Neanderthals. And then they ended up giving birth to these strange creatures, right? Or giants, etc., etc. That became the stuff of legends, right? The Greek legends, we call the thing with the one eye, Cyclops, the Minotaur, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so it says here, the Gentiles were created Aborigines in the beginning by the word of God in all lands. Adam, the father of the Jews, was formed of clay or dust of the earth by the hand of God. Genesis, after the first chapter, is a history not of the first men but of the first Jews. The existence of pre-Adamites is also indicated in the biblical account of Adam's family and the genealogy, the lineage, especially of Cain. Okay, so Cain's gone. He has another son, replacement son Seth, who becomes the heir, or because he's the older son, Cain's not around, of that lineage to follow, right, the descendants, because obviously Seth has a wife and he has children who then have children who then have children who then have children, right? So the lineage goes like 930 years or something. It's not Adam living to that age, it's in your English Bibles. That's incorrect translation, bad translation. Okay, so they interbred with these Neanderthals and created these hybrids, these strange creatures, giants, etc., etc. And then men went insane because they turned their back on God and indulged in their lusts and perversions, or whatever was going, whatever they could do, they did it according to the Brita and the Bible scriptures, etc. Okay, so Cain, who found a wife among some other peoples and went forth in fear of violence from strange hands. The biblical doctrine is corroborated by the evidence afforded by the monuments of Egypt and Chaldea, and by the history of the astronomy, astrology, theology and magic of the Gentiles, as well as by the racial features of remote and savage tribes, and by those discoveries of fossil remains in the rocks, which were then recent events, but which have since become the foundation of the modern science of geology. 10. Hence the epoch of the creation of the world does not date from that beginning, commonly figured in Adam, but from a remoter beginning which is to be sought in ages long since past. Okay, so that's where that Arabic word Yuma comes in, which means immeasurable period, unfathomable period, eon, era, age, or day with a capital D. So here this would be saying, it was a much older era, okay, unfathomable period, immeasurable period, when things happened and these pre-Adamic beings were created or turned up, etc., etc., before the common Adam, or the human being, right, made from the dust of the earth or whatever, by God. Okay, so hence the epoch of the creation of the world does not date from that beginning, commonly figured in Adam, but from a remoter beginning which is to be sought in ages long since past. So you have scientists, etc., that say no, the earth is older than 6,000 years, okay, which means that that day pushed by the churches, etc., is not a literal 12-hour day or period of daylight and 12 hours of night. So God didn't make everything in 6 literal days. Remember the scripture, 1,000 years is like a day to God, or a day is like 1,000 years, or etc. Right? So he's spending a lot of time. No one was there to write it down, okay, and pass it on and say, well, God started at 4 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, May, and 4,000 BCE or whatever, and finished on the 6th day, which was next week, and it was Sunday at 5 p.m. Whatever. There's no one there to verify that. No human beings were created at that time. Or perhaps there was Neanderthal man, but he didn't, he had no inkling for God or whatever, because he didn't have that spirit, the spirit of God, so he just wandered off, did his thing, right? He didn't write it down. Say, that's right, God created everything in 6 little days. Okay, it didn't come about at that stage until Adam and Eve were created, and then centuries later, in modern times, Christians, pastors or whatever, say, oh yeah, that's it. God literally created everything in 6 days, and then had a rest on Sunday or whatever, or the 7th day, whatever, right? Okay, so the deluge of Noah was not universal, and it destroyed only the Jews. Okay, we remember, I think, the translator, Aramaic speaking translator from Betnarim, Mesopotamia, and Syria, Victor Alexander, actually dropped a hint on his website, va.com, that floods happened in the Mesopotamian region. Don't know if he said the word only, but we have a book called The Timetables of History by what's his name? Bernard Green, which is a revised edition of Werner Steiner, is it? His Culture Farpley, 3rd edition, right? which page 3 under G, daily life, actually states there was floods in the Mesopotamian region. Okay, so it wasn't global. Okay, maybe, as we stated in that video or another video, possibly there was a global flood, but that's probably when the ice age was over and the polar caps started to melt and cause these massive floods, tidal waves, earthquakes, whatever, and wiped out the dinosaurs and so forth. Or some asteroid hit the Earth and caused these massive tidal waves and earthquakes and stuff, according to scientific research, discoveries, whatever. All the facts. Okay. So here it says the deluge of Noah, the flood of Noah, was not universal or global, and it destroyed only the Jews, or that Mesopotamian region, because they're the original Jews, aren't they? Judeans, because you get the word Jews from the first two letters of their name, whether it be Yehudi, Yehudai, Yehudians, or Judeans, right? Judah. Yeah, and supposedly that they used that probably prior to the Middle Ages or during the Middle Ages, and they were referred to that as the Jews. German Juden, Juden, and there's a Chinese one as well. It's pretty similar to that. I don't know if it has a Y, but yeah, pretty similar. Okay, so nor is it possible to trace to know the origins of all the races of men. It's what this one here might cover. Okay, that they were all European or white, coming out of the ark. Ham, Japheth, and Shem, is it? Okay, none of them were African or anything like that. Whereas some people of different US Hebrew Israelite movements, etc., or something similar to that, say, oh yeah, one of them was a black man. It doesn't actually tell you that in that Genesis account that he actually was, right? It just says 3 sons along with Noah and his wife and their 3 wives stepped out of the ark, and they were named Ham, Japheth, and Shem. And then further on they say, like Mormons and that, Adam was turned black because he sinned. This guy, I think was it Japheth? Japheth, Cam, and I've forgotten their names again. But those 3 anyway, they stepped out. Because this one that saw Noah was drunk, he created a vineyard, drank the wine, got really wasted, and the first son came in and saw him naked. Some have suggested that he, did some dirty stuff, but that's all hearsay, right? Noah was angry at him because he didn't cover him or something. He turned his back and walked out, something like that. And the other sons came in, put a coat over him or something. Yeah, so he cursed him and said that he'd be the servant to these other younger brothers or something, according to the scriptures, right? So some try to say, he was black, that sort of stuff. Okay, without the indication there or the evidence there saying that he actually was. Okay, so here it says, nor is it possible to know the origins of all the races of men. Some of these positions were far in advance of the age, and it's only just to say that they were defended with learning and ingenuity, and best of all with moderation and candor, but they were all heretical. Peireus was therefore made a victim of the intolerance of the times. Numerous replies were thrown upon the world, most of which bitterness, contempt, and denunciation were employed to supply all deficiencies of argument. Many of these this author had been able, through the kindness of some person called Mr. Spofford, librarian to Congress, to examine in the Congressional Library the most important whose translated titles that this author is here presenting will serve to convey an idea of the temper of the age. No pre-Adamite being or a confutation of a certain empty dream in which a certain anonymous author, under pretext of sacred scripture, has lately attempted to impose on the incautious, pretending that men were in the world before Adam. Let me read that again. No pre-Adamite being, or a confutation of a certain empty dream. So there's no pre-Adamite being or a confutation of a certain empty dream in which a certain anonymous author, under pretext of sacred scripture, has lately attempted to impose on the incautious, pretending that men were in the world before Adam. To animate versions of the book of pre-Adamites, in which a late writer is confuted and the doctrine is defended that Adam was the first of all men. Okay, 3. Response to a treatise entitled Pre-Adamites. The writers of these responses have, of course, employed strictly scriptural arguments, but they have brought to their aid the dialectic skill which characterizes scholastic theology, as well as the authority of the older writers and the dicta of councils and ecclesiastics. So what's he saying here? That these writers of these responses have used the scriptural arguments, to determine that it's actually fact that that there's no pre-Adamites, that there's just Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel. Yeah, there's no others created. Now the whole controversy concerns a question of fact, and we're at this day in possession of many collateral lines of evidence to be placed by the side of old scriptural interpretation. We can summon ethnology, archaeology and anthropology to bear witness. The truth seems to be that these witnesses are quite as competent to testify as witnesses need to be. It is their business to know all that is knowable about the matter. The answer to the question is a fact of science, sustaining fixed relations to the other facts patent before the eyes of the investigator. Whether the world has been populated by people who spread from Ararat 42 centuries ago, or even from Mesopotamia 59 centuries ago, is a question of fact, to be investigated strictly on the basis of scientific evidence. The author here puts he thinks or he thought a great deal of evidence was then accessible, perhaps enough to lead all to a final conclusion. Whatever conclusions may be found to represent the truth, he believed the sacred records will be found in harmony. Kind of a tough one to get your head around. You need to spend time reading and analysing it, defining words so you don't have any misunderstoods, take it out of context to fully understand what this guy is talking about. Don't forget he's supposedly racist motivated, racially motivated. He's a racist. Okay, that's why he was dropped. This book was ho-hummed, right? Chapter 2, Dispersion of the Noachites. In discussing the question of pre-Adamites from anthropological data, the first requisite is to trace the geographical dispersion of the descendants of Noah. The oldest document available for information on this subject is the Book of Genesis, and aside from any claim to inspiration, its statements respecting the immediate posterity of Noah have been found so closely accordant with the observed facts that ethnologists are content to adopt this information as a starting point. It is agreed then that the enlightened nations of the world belong to one race. What's he saying there? That they all came from one race? Yeah, one lot of beings, human beings, the Adamites, the Adams in his lineage. Yeah, because Adam had another son, replacement son, because Cain killed Abel, so they would have come from the line of Seth, who were supposedly all into God, children of God, but some left that rightful place, the presence of God, worshiping God. They abandoned that position and then went with daughters of the ungodly line, the daughters of human beings, right? Because it does say in Genesis, Adam had Seth, who became the heir of that lineage, head of that lineage, who then had sons and daughters, and at that point after they were born, after Seth, or during Seth's lineage, those began to be called the children of God. Okay? Or in your English Bibles, they began to call upon the name of the Lord, but in the ancient Brita, it says they became the children of God, the line of the children of God. That was it. The lineage, right? That was that holy line that started until they got to a certain point where they saw the daughters of men, human beings, the ungodly line, right? The ungodly line to be. That ungodly line that ended up doing whatever they desired. They were just like sinning, doing evil, going insane, doing it, right? To follow. They left their position and married them, whoever they wanted, right? And then they created these hybrids, etc., etc. So that, like, basically from there, because men at that time were doing unspeakable evils, right? They all abandoned their and turned their backs on God, right? There's only like Noah, his 3 wives, his 3 sons, Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their 3 wives that were righteous, right? They didn't turn their back on God. So, remembering them, he supposedly tells Noah to create this ark, because we've got 120 years from now, something. It's going to be this massive flood. I'm going to wipe them all out because they're just going insane with evil. They're going to wipe everything out, but because I remember you and you're righteous, you're a good man, whatever. Hop in this ark, here's the planes, and survive on, and then repopulate the earth, and so forth, as far as that Bible goes. So, Peter, Genesis, whatever. Okay, where are we? Okay, it is agreed then that the enlightened nations of the world belong to one race. This is the race of white men. Yeah, okay, because the Bible doesn't say they were dark. Only Mormons say, well, Adam turned black because he sinned. Okay, that's just their claim. Might not necessarily be fact. Okay, that's their dogma or whatever. This is the race of white men. By Blumenbach, it was styled Caucasian because our earliest knowledge of the race finds it in the region south of the Caucasus, a dominant European family, which is the leading type of the race, is first discovered on the north and south of the Caucasus. But if you have a look into the real history, apparently it's a mixed race. Like you're like saying, like, oh yeah, just the Aryan race, all that sort of stuff. But who were the original Aryans? Right? They were a mixture of brown, black, Asian, white, etc. Right? Okay, so Blumenbach, it was by Blumenbach, it sounds like a German, maybe it's Dutch, I don't know, it looks like German. It was styled Caucasian because the earliest knowledge of the race finds it in the region south of the Caucasus Mountains, right? And the dominant European family, which is the leading type of the race, is first discovered. Apparently, like, there was already these Caucasians there, and then these other ones came in and invaded it, right? Those mountains, etc., that range, Caucasus range, and became Caucasians. Have a look at the word, Caucasian, yeah, Asiatics. So they're a mixture, okay, of these different people. Going to find that word. Find out what it really means. Where are we again? By Blumenbach, it was styled Caucasian because our earliest knowledge of the race finds it in the region south of the Caucasus, and the dominant European family, which is the leading type of the race, is first discovered on the north and south of the Caucasus. But recent ethnologists designate the white race as Mediterranean because the 3 families which constitute it have always, since very early times, dwelt around the shores of the Mediterranean. From the earliest history of this race, it has presented 3 family types. Since the dispersion of these 3 families accords with the biblical account of the dispersion of the posterity of the 3 sons of Noah, science has agreed to designate them Hamites, Semites and Japhetites. Yeah, that's the name of her sons. Ham, Shem and Japhet. The last are more frequently known as Indo-Europeans or Aryans, names which associate the natives of India with the dominant European family. So what he's trying to say there, the Indians walked into that area and became part of that European family, because history seems to tell us that it was the other way around. Now, fortunately, these Europeans, like Hitler, etc., says we are that race, the perfect race, we are the Aryans. Now, unfortunately, we are able to indicate with considerable certainty the regions occupied by the three families of Noachites. The Hamites are known to have distributed themselves through the north of Africa. Okay, this is like Africans, which ended up being the Nigerians, Nubians, the Egyptians, ancient Kemet, etc. Okay, the Hamites are known to have distributed themselves through the north of Africa, the Nile Valley, the Egyptians, and the east of the continent as far as the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb. They passed from Asia Minor into the southeast of Europe as early as 2500 BC and occupied the peninsula of Greece under the name of Pelasgians. To this family belonged the Etruscans, who at a later date migrated from Greece and founded a kingdom in Italy, centuries before the building of Rome by another family. Yeah, we read about that the Greeks were there first. The Phoenicians were probably Hamites instead of Semites. Unexpected and truly wonderful events, evidence of the common origin of these earliest Greeks, early Phoenicians and early Egyptians, has been unearthed by D.C. Snoller on the islands of Cyprus, where pottery and works of art presenting Egyptian and Phoenician characteristics are mingled with conceptions characteristically Greek. Late researchers have shown that the original Chaldean monarchy, also before the 18th century BC, was Hamitic and not Semitic, and its written language was Akkadian, the parent of the cuneiform character. Is that right? Because in the Bible, that story where all men gathered unto one place into a region, a desert region called Sumer or Shinar, and built the tower. We lost it now. Was Babylonian. Okay. Back here again. Late researchers have shown that the original Chaldean monarchy, also before the 18th century BC, was Hamitic and not Semitic, and its written language was Akkadian, the parent of the cuneiform character. Because we're looking at the histories of these supposed first nations or civilizations. Let's stick with nations. That there was the Sumerians, and then the Akkadians, and then the Babylonians, and then followed by the Mesopotamians, the Assyrians, etc. So we realised, hang on, if those people went to that one place in Sumer or Shinar, which is desert region in that Mesopotamian Assyrian country, right? Then wouldn't, and if they built the Tower of Babylon, right? Is it Babylon that was basically a nation first, because the people united and speaking one language in the building this tower? They're written in the Bible to one turn to the other and says, let's give ourselves a name. There is a name of a nation, right? So if we get scattered, etc., etc., right? So we won't be scattered or something like that. And they built the Tower of Babylon, which is the Tower of Babel, because the languages were confused by God, etc., etc., right? Then they were dispersed, and they spoke these different languages. So if they spoke this one language, supposed to be the language of God, God spoke to Adam, and then he spoke to these men, or through these men. Then what was that? Was it Aramaic? Okay, or was it something prior to that? Okay. You'd have to look deep into that and provide their evidence. But apparently they were given this language, the Aramaic, the ancient Aramaic. Right? All men spoke it, all men knew it. It's the language of God. Yishana Atika Sabra. In itself, which means the language of God, spoken by God to men. So maybe Babylon being built, the Tower of Babel being built, because this is the first city, right, in the Bible. Maybe that was the kingdom that was first, right, and in the language first, Babylonian first, then Akkadian, then Babylonian, then Sumerian, then Akkadian, and then the Mesopotamian, Chaldean, Mesopotamian, Assyrian, etc. followed after that. Not too sure on that one, because here, this is just from what we recall for our personal research, right? This here is saying late researchers in that period, right, that followed him in his era, his time, right, this time. Late researchers have shown that the original Chaldean monarchy, also before the 18th century BC, was Hamitic and not Semitic, and its written language was Akkadian, the parent of the cuneiform character. So we're not too sure on that one, because we always taught through history, learning whatever, personal research, that it was first the Sumerian, then the Akkadian, and then the Babylonian, and that Sumerian the cuneiform wasn't Semitic, they weren't Semitic peoples, but the Akkadian and the Babylonians to follow were. And then you got the Mesopotamians, the Assyrians, etc., who are Semites as well. Okay, so we're not too sure on this statement here. Did they come from that linealogy of Ham? Not Shem? We'd have to have a look at one of these Bibles here to check that out. Yeah, we're not going to look at that one because it's a JW. We're not against that, but it's the only one around. Oh no, here we go. We got another one, NIV. So we're looking at. Where's this? Looks like I can see it. When he comes out of the ark. What verse is that? Okay, it's probably Genesis 10 or something. Okay, Genesis 9. The sons of Noah. Genesis 9 verse 18 in the NIV. The sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. It's the land that Abraham ended up entering and sharing with him for a while, right? The land, promised land. God said, leave your land of Ur of Chaldea and go to this land of Canaan, the land of milk and honey, etc. These were the three sons of Noah, and from them came the people who were scattered over the earth. Noah, a man of the soil, proceeded to plant a vineyard. When he drinks some of his wine, blah blah blah. Okay, so let's go into this genealogy thing here. The table of nations. This is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons. They come out of the ark, right? There's nobody else but them, according to the biblical account. And the three wives, and Noah's wife, and himself. This is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons, who themselves had sons after the flood. So they had children after the flood. It doesn't mention daughters, but it says sons there. The Japhethites, Japhethites. Hang on, let's say it properly. Japhethites. The sons of Japheth. Okay, these were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras are supposed to be like the Germans, the Medes, the Greeks, etc., etc., right? If you look at the genealogy list in the Brita, it goes into depth and explains all of those. Ashkenazis like Germans, German Jews, etc., and so forth. So we're going to look back at that. Ham. Where's it got about? Oh, the Hamites. Here we go. the sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. Okay, it doesn't say they were black there, or Africans, or whatever, right? We're going to have a look at the footnote down the bottom here. It's got an indication of C. I'm trying to find it. That is Egypt, also in verse 13. Okay, so it's talking about the Egyptians, who were the first occupiers of Egypt. Okay, the peoples of Egypt. Weren't they black? Maybe they were Nubians. Maybe they were certain people. We look at their wall reliefs and go, well, those guys are pretty tall, pretty skinny, so they could possibly be of Indian origin, as in Hindu, India, etc. They look very much like that. Or they could be just some sort of African race. Yeah, like a mix, and maybe you got the Phoenicians and whoever going there for trade and all that sort of stuff, so they intermarried. Right? Sometimes their statues look Asian, African. You got the lips and the nose and all that sort of stuff. Other times they look, on their wall reliefs, they look skinny, tall, light, like Indians, right? If you look at an Indian person, they're all tall and skinny. And then maybe the Nubians, etc., came in and invaded and took over, right, and then ruled from there. You'd have to know the correct ancient Egypt Hemetic history, right, to verify that. Okay, so that's saying that the Egyptians. So according to this video here, don't know if we can look at this map again. Okay, we're going to go play it. Because he produces a map.
It really is something that nobody really talks about, and yet it has changed the world and continues to change the world. It's called the Hemetic Hypothesis. It's an idea that developed over hundreds of years, became very popular in the 19th century, but continues to affect parts of the world today, particularly Africa. It's the subject of a book that's...
Okay, good jump, because I think he goes on about Livingston and Stanley. I'm trying to find this particular map. It might be further in.
A continent. This story, well, I should tell you, I'm a historian of exploration, and that's my job. I look at explorers and expeditions and cultural encounters with people around the world, and why people think these expeditions are so important back home. And this...
Okay, here it is here. Pretty sure this is that map.
That he calls the white.
Okay, Richard March finds a group that he calls the White Indians. He's saying this is about the white race. White races were founded. So this claim that the darker races ruled the world, all these places, right? And then the white man moved in, or the European moved in and took over, might be incorrect. Okay, he's saying all these different locations where they were found, especially by Dr. Livingston, the discoverer. This guy was captured by Africans or something, and this guy came along and says, to release him or whatever, set him free, whatever he says. His first supposed words to Dr. Livingston was, Dr. Livingston, I presume? And it was, this is a Stanley guy, and this is where all these white races were located. It was in those times, through the evidence, whatever, of presented in 1800s or something, whatever it mentions in this video. And also it's got here down in New Zealand, there's white races. So we've got a lot of comments before of supposedly Maori was Moses, and he brought all his Israelites to New Zealand or something like that, so they're the Hebrews or this sort of stuff, or the Chinese were here before the Maori, according to this Smith guy from Australia. They were like Chinese miners, all that sort of stuff, not like underage, but miners that are looking for gold, whatever, precious jewels, whatever, right? All that sort of stuff. And yet the Maori didn't come from Hawaii, all this other stuff. They're actually from the Bay of Islands, or up here somewhere in the north, right? And then sailed over here somewhere, or travelled down there, whatever. All this different stuff. Okay. Supposedly the Celtics were here because of the many blue carvings. They have on maraes, or meeting houses. This guy went around New Zealand, geologist or whatever he was, and he found these carvings. He says even the tattoos, the mokos on people, the chiefs' faces and stuff like that, these spires and that, they're coming from the Celtics. Okay, there's little pygmy people or fairy people, red-headed people, Children of the Mist, all the different claims, right? That the Maori came from Egypt, and you look at what's his name? The Book of Beginnings, Part 2. We've done a video on that. Gerald Massey, and he compares the Akkadian Hebrew and the Maori language with the ancient Egyptian. Okay, so it gives the impression that they were from there. He goes on about the Aborigines of Australia. This was in like 1889. Supposedly said to be an Egyptologist, a historian, but possibly didn't have the valid qualifications, PhDs, whatever. He's criticised by his peers that he didn't have these and that, right? And so forth. Okay, so here's a map. Okay, might go back a little bit. Here's that map we're talking about. Go back a little bit. So it'll play.
Panama, Richard Marsh.
Back a little bit more.
Finding more and more kind of stories of these tribes, these white tribes that people had discovered all over the world. So, for example, in Panama, Richard Marsh finds a group that he calls the White Indians. And in Central Asia, there's a group of people who said they found Tibetans who looked Aryan. And in parts of Africa, people were finding white tribes as well. And in Japan, people discovered in the late 19th century a group called the Ainu in the northern island of Japan, which they said looked like Caucasians. So by the time I got to about 2008, I had this giant file of kind of weird white tribe discoveries, and I figured now was the time to do something with it. But there was one story in particular that I was interested in, and that was the story of a discovery that took place in East Africa in the 1870s, in that red box that you see there. It happened just to the west of Lake Victoria, one of the largest lakes in the world, and it was made by a very famous explorer, Henry Morton Stanley. Now, Stanley may be familiar to you as the guy who discovers Livingstone, or rescues Livingstone, in the heart of Africa in 1869. In fact, the phrase, "Dr. Livingstone, I presume," was supposedly something that Stanley said to Livingstone when they met. This was one of the most famous expeditions of the 19th century. But Stanley went back to Africa, and went back many times. And on his subsequent expedition to Africa, he went not to find Livingstone, but to try to discover the source of the Nile. People knew by the late 1800s that there were many lakes in the areas of East Africa, what we call the Rift Valley of East Africa, and that one of these lakes would have been the source of the Nile, something that geographers had been searching for 2,000 years. But Stanley said, I'm going to figure out which of these lakes it actually is. And so he treks into East Africa, and he determines with great confidence that Lake Victoria is the ultimate source of the Nile. 4,000 miles of Nile River, and that is the source. But what he also discovers is something that, in a sense, creates a new mystery, which is he finds that there are members of an African soldier force that are protecting him, which look white. And he calls them Greeks in white shirts. He can't believe how light-complected these Africans are. He asks other members of his expedition party, who are these men? And they say, they come from the mountains to the west on a mountain called Gambara. So he writes about this and sends these reports back home. And the illustrations of his narrative actually show Mount Gambara over on the left-hand side of the illustration. You can see it in the background. This became a huge story back home, this lost white race that Stanley had found in the heart of Africa. Now, how in God's name would Stanley have explained this in the late 18th century? What kind of theoretical background could people use, or information, why you would find a group of white people living in the heart of Africa? In fact, Stanley, very much as a man of the 1800s, was at this transition moment between people who used the Bible as a way of explaining the history of the world and people who used science as a way of explaining the history of the world. And so when Stanley thought about it, he actually looked back to the Middle Ages when people tried to explain the differences that we saw in the peoples of the world, what we would call racial differences, and look to the stories of Genesis, in particular the story of Noah. And in the story of Noah, we all know about Noah and the flood, but a lot of people don't know what happened after the flood, which was Noah parks the ark on the top of Mount Ararat, disembarks with his family, as well as his three sons, Sem, Japheth, and Ham. And it was really these three sons that many people in the Middle Ages, and by that we're talking about Jews, Christians, and Muslims, all looked at this story as a kind of explanation for how the world got repopulated after it was annihilated in Genesis 9. And as you see here, this is a medieval map showing the three sons of Noah on the three known continents of the world. Asia on the top. You see the little ark there at the very top, hanging out on top of Ararat.
It's just a depiction. It's a painting depicting.
And Sem, the base of the word Semitic, comes from Sem, Noah's son. And then in the bottom left corner is Europe. This map is rotated east, by the way. On the bottom left, you see Europe, and that's Japheth, the son of Japheth. And then the forerunner of all Africans, people thought, were the descendants of Ham. And so when Stanley talks about this white tribe, he says somehow they must be related. They must be somehow related to the tribe of Ham, and they became known as Hamites. But this was a transition point, and Stanley was a very smart man, and he was also not just reading his Bible. He was also reading Darwin, and he was reading Charles Lyell, who were beginning to, in a sense, dismantle a kind of biblical history of the world. Guys like Darwin and Lyell said the world was not 6,000 years old. It's hundreds of thousands of years old. They had no idea how old it really was. But it was very, very old. And in addition to that, species maybe didn't stay fixed over time. Maybe species changed over time. Maybe, in fact, human beings were once resembled something else. And so Stanley began to try to adopt these old ideas and graft them to new ideas. And a lot of other people at the time did as well. And strangely enough, the Hemetic Hypothesis, this idea that all Africans came from the descendants of Ham, that son of Noah, somehow got weirdly flipped to, no, Hamites are not all Africans. Hamites are some invasion of white people that happened in the ancient past. And that this invasion of white people explains why we're finding white tribes all over the world. Now, if this sounds a little bizarre, let me kind of reinforce, this was not some wacky idea like, scientists who go looking for Sasquatch or people trying to prove cold fusion. This was anthropologists, linguists, paleontologists, all kinds of scientists from across the spectrum were interested in this. This is a map, for example, of an anthropologist named Griffith Taylor, who was actually trying to describe what he saw as the racial dispersion of groups out of Asia around the world. Now you'll look, and it kind of looks like a swirling map, but just to orient you here, the middle of the map is Asia. And as you see, there are these kind of initial kind of flows outward of darker races. Now, Griffith Taylor believed that the first races of the human species were primitive, and that the later races of the species were more advanced. And like most 19th century Europeans and North Americans, when they thought about primitive and advanced, they saw it also as a racial ladder, and that primitive meant dark-skinned and advanced meant light-skinned. So they created a kind of color map of the world. To give you another example, he called this the lava flow analogy, that all of the races of the human species emerged first in Asia, and then gradually the later, more advanced races, i.e. the white race, kind of rolled over the other races and spread itself out as it conquered and overcame and drove to the edges the darker raced peoples of the world, either intermarrying with them or conquering them. So this was this idea that could somehow explain why you would find white tribes in weird areas. It also happened to fit very nicely with what was happening in the late 19th century, which was new white tribes were taking over other places in the world. Europeans were madly scrambling for colonial possessions from Asia to Africa. In fact, this map of Africa from the late 19th century shows essentially the color codes here are different color codes for European countries. Brown is France, green is Great Britain, blue is Belgian, that purplish color is German. Literally all of Africa had been carved up by European countries as they tried to grab colonies. So the
These are all the colours there, trying to pause it.
idea that there had been white ancestors who had done this before kind of fit the mode of European thinking at the time. And as European colonists came into these parts of Africa, and they looked at various groups of Africans, they said, these...
Okay, so it decided to lag, so we just pause it there. Okay, he says these are the Hamites, these are the proto-white people that this other
These are
person
the
is saying.
Hamites. These are these proto-white people. Let's treat them slightly different than these people that we think of as being black African. And so, over the course of the late 19th century, some groups, like the Bahima, the Batutsi of Rwanda, the Nyamwezi of Tanzania, were called white, and other groups were called, like the Bahutu of Rwanda, were called black. Now, at the time, Africans did not have the same idea of racial concept, right? They thought mostly in terms of ethnic or clan terms, and yet these ideas caught on. And it also allowed Europeans and North Americans, when they looked at the great kind of legacy.
Yeah, these Africans and that, according to the debate of John Henrik Clarke with that, what's his name, Horowitz or something, and this other guy said Africans, they had no concept of racial differences, right? Like skin color, all that sort of stuff. They just invited these people in, you know. They didn't care about that. They had no, it wasn't in their mindset, and so forth. Okay, so this is an interesting video. You can watch it in your own time. It's available on YouTube, obviously. It's very detailed, and it might be coming up about pyramids in Zimbabwe and the Great Pyramids or something like that. Okay, so continuing with this book. Where are we? From the earliest history of this race. Okay, we'll go here. But recent ethnologists designate the white race as Mediterranean because the three families which constitute it have always since very early times throughout around the shores of the Mediterranean. From the earliest history of this race, it has presented three family types. Since the dispersion of these three families accords with the biblical account of the dispersion of the posterity of the three sons of Noah, science has agreed to designate them Hamites, Semites, and Japhetites. The last are more frequently known as Indo-European or Aryans, names which associate the natives of India with the dominant European family. Now, fortunately, we are able to indicate with considerable certainty the regions occupied by the three families of Noachites. The Hamites were known to have distributed themselves throughout the north of Africa, the Nile Valley, and the east of the continent as far as the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb. Didn't this guy in this video here say, well, they weren't necessarily dark-skinned? They may have actually been white. Yeah? He's not being racist or anything like that. It's just from what this other person that went there and was told, yeah, they come from these certain mountains, Garabarama or whatever the name of it was. Yeah. Further up there, right? Okay? Because this guy says, well, they look very, very white. You know? Etc., etc. They passed from Asia Minor into the southeast of Europe as early as 2500 BC and occupied the peninsula of Greece under the names of Pelasgians. To this family belonged the Etruscans, who at a later date migrated from Greece and founded a kingdom in Italy. Centuries before the building of Rome by another family, the Phoenicians were probably Hamites instead of Semites. Unexpectedly and truly wonderful evidence of the common origins of these earliest Greeks, early Phoenicians and early Egyptians has been unearthed by Cesnola on the islands of Cyprus, where pottery and works of art presenting Egyptian and Phoenician characteristics are mingled with conceptions of characteristically Greek. Late researchers in his period right, that followed, showed that the original Chaldean monarchy, also before the 18th century BC, was Hamitic and not Semitic, and its written language was Akkadian, the parent of the cuneiform character. These are the views of the latest and best recognised authorities. Henry Rawlinson, the Norman, you heard of that guy, Oppet, Peschel, Dubainville, we have to have a look at those guys. The Egyptians were certainly pure Hamites, and they are still represented by the Fellahim, or peasantry of the Lower Nile. So have a look at all of this, and especially by the Coptic Christians of the towns. The Hamitic Berbers, including Libyans, Moors, Numidians, and Gaetulians, are spread intermingled with Semites and Europeans throughout the countries of the Mediterranean and through the Sahara. Other Hamitic nations possessing a civilization far beyond that of any of the purely black races occupy some of the regions about the Nile, especially Nubia, and are scattered in distinct tribes united by common linguistic elements. Through Abyssinia in one direction as far as the heart of Africa, from 8 degrees north to 3 degrees south, and in the other direction from near Bab el-Mandeb to Juba on the Indian Ocean. The Hamitic dialects and Hamitic civilization, wherever they occur, are readily recognized as superior to any of the indigenous production of the black races. Okay, so is he hinting there some racist statements? The iniquity of Hamitic civilization in Egypt is indicated by the recorded observations of the heliacal rising of the dog star. This is the rising of the dog star just before the sun in the first Thoth, or month of the year. Funny how they use that word today for wayward females. I'm sure they call them a Thoth. Not too sure on that one. This is a, or heard it, yeah. This is a, or maybe it's a thought, can't remember. This is a conjunction which occurs only once in 1461 years, 1461 years. We have a heliacal rising recorded for about 1322, and he goes on about that. Some other respectable authorities as Lane, Poole, Brown and Wilkinson descent from the inference of so high an antiquity for the first Egyptian dynasty. They maintain that the era of Menes reaches back no farther than 2717 BC, and some second-hand Egyptologists would bring it down to 246-64 BC, and so forth. It's impossible to discern the logic if we could discover the motive for the prevalent desire to cut down the period of Egyptian civilization, since nearly all the original investigators agree in assigning to it a high antiquity. The best moderate of the German authorities places Menes at 3892 BC, and in his time the Egyptians had long been architects, sculptors, etc., etc. So it is proper also to add that in spite of English and American incredulity, all the recent archaeological discoveries within Egypt and Assyria at Hisarlik, Mycenae or Cyprus tend to prolong antiquity, and so far as Egypt is concerned, to strengthen the authority of much suspected and much slighted Manetho. So they think he's off, maybe? He can't be relied on, maybe. See Bayard Taylor's Egypt and Iceland, Skillman's Ancient Troy and Mycenae, D. C. Snoller's Cyprus, George Smith's Assyrian excavations. He's the one that helped Henry Layard and Razam guy translate those cuneiform texts, those clay tablets, when they discovered the Nineveh library, apparently. Okay, this is the whole of the geographical dispersion of the Hamites. The reader will note particularly that they have not spread over most parts of Africa. The Negroes are not regarded by modern ethnologists, or those ones in his time, right, as descendants of Ham. Now let us follow the track of the Semites. From the earliest records, they have inhabited Western Asia. Thence they have taken possession of parts of Eastern Africa. They are represented by the Jews, Arabs, Abyssinians and Aramaeans. They subjugated the Hamitic Babylonians and Chaldeans at a date earlier than the migration of Abraham from Ur of the Chaldees, or Babylonian. They adopted the Hamitic religion, which in Western Asia was the worship of God under the names of Baal and Bel. Because Abraham went to that land, and they basically were living there side by side with these Canaanites, right? And the Canaanites are doing all this Baal and Bel worship. They probably also conquered and consolidated with themselves the Phoenician people. They have migrated to some extent into eastern and northern Central Africa and have familiarized the Negroes with a rude Muslim civilization. Yeah, they came and invaded them because these Africans said, save us from the Romans, they're too cruel a master. So the Arabs did that, the Muslims did that, and then forced them into Islam, believing in Islam, accepting Islam, etc., and then in the ranks of their armies. So they basically went from one slave master to another slave master, who then became supposedly an institution for their slavery, right? Their enslavement. Yeah. The Romans made it. I've forgotten the word for that one, but the Egyptian, the Mohammedans or the Muslims made it an institution. Okay, is that saying? Okay, look online for it. We can't remember what that other word was. The results also of linguistic study show that the Hamites and Semites developed their languages in a common primeval home. This is also taught in Genesis chapter 10, 1:15. Genesis 1, 10, 15, right? Going to have a look at that. Okay, might be irrelevant though. Yeah, to us in this particular video and study, or study and video, 1:10. Okay, we're looking at that. What does it say? God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Is that the right one? It's chapter 10, 1:15. I know it didn't make sense. Okay, 1:15. Okay, 1:15. And let them be lights in the expanse of the sky to give lights on the. And let them be lights in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth. Is it the right verse? Chapter 10. Oh, it's chapter 10. We're looking at the wrong freaking thing. No wonder it didn't make sense. 10, right. We're in the wrong chapter. 10, 15. Yeah, 10, 1 to 15. 1, 10, 1. This is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons, who themselves had sons after the flood, right down to 15. It's like a lineage list, right? But the Hamites, the Japhethites, and etc. Shemites. 10. Where are we? The first centers of his kingdom were Babylon, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh and Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria, where he built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Calah, and Rezin, which is between Nineveh and Calah. That is the great city. Who's he talking about? Cush. Cush was the father of Nimrod, who grew to be a mighty warrior on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That is why it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. Okay, and it goes on about the first centers that he created. Okay. We'll go back up here. Cush was the father of Nimrod. Okay. Again, created his kingdom. The first centers of his kingdom were Babylon, Erech, Akkad, okay, which became the land of the Akkadians. And someone said online that there was no Akkadian nation. It's got here in the Bible, in Genesis, Akkad, which is, I'm sure that's hinting at the Akkadians. And Calneh and Shinar. Where's Shinar? We're looking at the F footnote indication of this NIV. Trying to find it here. It's so small. That is Babylonia. Okay, it's Babylonia. Okay, Akkad encounters. Is that a smaller part of that great city Babylonia? Because the IA on the end of it is a N suffix from the Greek. It's a Greek Latin loan word which indicates that was belonging to or of a certain peoples. Okay. I.e. the Babylonians. Okay. So these are the cities that he first, or the centres of his kingdom that he first created. Okay, I'm going to go right back to Genesis 1 where it says about the rivers, the four heads, the tributaries that split into four heads. We go back there because there may be something interesting there. Hope we're not losing you in the process, confusing you. Okay, somewhere down here. Where is it? Where is it? Okay, it's a bit further. Genesis 2, I think. Okay. Genesis 2:10. A river watering the garden flowed from Eden. From there it was separated into four headwaters. The name of the first is the Pishon. Yeah, so it split this one river split into four heads or tributaries. A river watering the garden flowed from Eden, paradise, Eden. From there it was separated into four headwaters. The name of the first is the Pishon. It winds through the entire land of Havilah, modern Kuwait. If you look at these very, very old maps, yeah, and the modern maps, it's supposedly modern Kuwait. Where there is gold, the gold of that land is good. Aromatic resin and onyx are also there. The name of the second river is the Gihon. It winds through the entire land of Kush, and it's got an F footnote indication there. 13, possibly South Mesopotamia. Okay. We were led to believe, probably through the church pastors, whatever, that it was actually, or somebody else, that it was Ethiopia. Okay. So let's have a look at Kush to see if it is, to verify if it actually is. Put Sush. Okay. Because the letters on the keyboard have disappeared from use. Kingdom of Kush. Egypt's neighbour to the south played an important role with biblical history despite being one of the lesser known kingdoms. Okay. Kush Bible Wikipedia. Okay, he's talking about the son of Noah. What land is Kush? I'm going to put it in what land is Kush. What land was Kush? Where's the land of Kush? Okay. One reference in Psalms refers to Kush, the Benjamite. Isaiah 11:11 uses Kush to refer to a land. The land of Kush may have ended up as Ethiopia, but even if it did, it certainly did not always refer to Ethiopia. The Bible suggests that the land of Kush isn't Ethiopia, but instead an area somewhere in the region of southern Iraq or Saudi Arabia. Okay, any more here? Okay, here it says, land of Kush refers to the ancient Egyptian realm of Kush as mentioned in the Bible, which includes the same territory now occupied by South Sudan. Okay, does it actually say that that's where it is in the Bible? Here's another one. The land of Khusha refers to the land south of Israel and is translated as Ethiopia in some Bible versions. Okay, so one is saying it means this, another saying no, it means this, and then this one saying no, it means this. Okay. Okay, Africa. Here it says Africa was an ancient kingdom in Nubia, centered along the Nile Valley, in what is now northern Sudan and southern Egypt. The region of Nubia was an early cradle of civilization, producing several complex societies. Okay, so let's go check that out. Here it is in the Egyptian, Assyrian, Ancient Greek and Septuagint, Coptic, with this Ethiopic language, right? Is it? Yeah, closely related to the dialects descended from ancient Egypt, historically spoken by the Copts of Egypt, starting from the 3rd century AD in Roman Egypt. Coptic was supplanted by Arabic as the primary language, probably. Okay, region of Nubia was an early cradle of civilization, producing several complex societies that engaged in trade and industry. The state of Kerma emerged as a dominant political force between 2450 and 1450 BC, controlling the Nile Valley between the first and fourth cataracts of the Nile, shallow links of the Nile River between Khartoum and Aswan, where the surface of the water is broken by many small boulders and stones jutting out of the river beds, as well as many rocky islets, and so forth. An area as large as Egypt. The Egyptians were the first to identify Kerma as Kush, and over the next several centuries the two civilizations engaged in intermittent warfare, trade and cultural exchange. So here it says the first to identify Kerma as Kush was the Egyptians. Much of Nubia came under Egyptian rule during the New Kingdom period, 1550 to 1070 BC. Here's some information on it. Following Egypt's disintegration amid the Late Bronze Age collapse, some societal collapse before the Greek Dark Ages, the Kushites re-established their kingdom in Napata, now modern Karima, Sudan. Some information on that. Though Kush had developed many cultural affinities with Egypt, such as the veneration of Amun, a major ancient deity, and the royal families of both kingdoms often intermarried. Kushite culture was distinct. Egyptian art distinguished the people of Kush by the dress, appearance and even method of transportation. King Khusha, the Kushite, peacefully became king of Upper Egypt, while his daughter Amenidis was appointed as divine adoration of Amun in Thebes, and so forth. Yes, there's information on there, where the name came from. The native name of the kingdom was recorded in Egyptian as, I don't know how to say that, is it Kis? Then you have to ask an Egyptian, one of those House of Consciousness Semite followers. How do you say that? No idea how you say that. Might be Kish or something like that. Whatever that is. Is that Khufu? Yeah, it's probably Khufu. In Middle Egyptian, when the term was first used for Nubia, based on the New Kingdom era Akkadian transliteration of the genitive Kusi, so it might be Khufu. Not too sure now. It's not indicating anything. Yeah, Kiss. Yeah, I'm not too sure what it is. It is also an ethnic term for the native population who initiated the kingdom of Kush. The term is also displayed in the names of Kushite persons, such as King Khusha, a transcription of whatever that word there is. One from the land of Kush. Geographically, Kush referred to the region south of the First Cataract. In general, Kush also was the home of the rulers of the 25th dynasty. Possibly Nubians. Okay. The name Kush, since at least the times of Josephus, has been connected with the biblical character Cush in the Hebrew Bible. Son of Ham, Genesis 10:6. Ham had 4 sons named Cush, Put, Canaan. What's Put? for ancient Libya, but a few scholars propose the land of Punt, or Punt, known from ancient Egyptian annals or records. Canaan, according to the book of Genesis, is a Hebrew Bible, and the Hebrew Bible was the son of Ham and grandson of Noah, as well as of the father of the Canaanites. Mizraim, that probably Egypt, is a Hebrew and Aramaic name for the land of Egypt, with this dual suffix, this ending, right? Ayim, perhaps referring to the two Egypts, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Mizraim is the dual form of Matzor, meaning a mound or fortress, in the name of the people. So, yeah, probably because they first created that mound, according to the Egyptian ancient Kemet history. They first started making mounds, and then it developed into these pyramids, and so forth. Okay, Mizraim, Hebrew name for Egypt. According to the Bible, Nimrod, a son of Cush, was the founder and king of Babylon. Erech, Akkad, and Kalni in Shinar, or Sumer, named for the southern region of the Mesopotamia used by the Hebrew Bible. It's like a desert region, right? Well, it's in a desert, isn't it? There's Asher. Okay, it's somewhere in here. There's Babylon. So these people would have been here somewhere. They all men gathered with that, united and had one language, built these cities of Babylon, which would be Babylon or Babylonia, and all these other ones mentioned in the Bible, which doesn't look like they're actually listed here. Okay, these ones here. Genesis 10:10. The Bible also makes reference to someone named Cush who was a Benjamite. Psalm 71, KJV. Tribe of Benjamin, right? Of the 12 tribes of Israel. In Greek sources, Cush was known as Kus, is that? Kus, or Ethiopia. Okay. Ancient Ethiopia first appears as a geographical term in classical documents in reference to the Upper Nile region, as well as certain areas south of the Sahara Desert. Its earlier mention is in the works of Homer, twice in the Iliad, and 3 times somewhere else. Okay, so there's that problem there where it's supposed to be the Nubians, the Ethiopians, okay, and the Egyptians. Okay, so which one is it? We'll go with the Greek, maybe, that says it's Ethiopians, but yeah, not too sure. Okay, some more history here. Kingdom of Cush. With the disintegration of the new kingdom around 1070 BC, Cush became an independent kingdom centered at Napata, okay, along the Nile, the fourth cataract of the Nile, in modern northern Sudan. Is that still there today, or one of those civilizations or cities or villages or whatever that's on the River Nile? This more Egyptianized kingdom of Khusha emerged possibly from Kerma and regained the region's independence from Egypt. Okay, what was Kerma again? Okay, is it further up here? Kerma. Capital city of the Kerma culture, which was located in present-day Sudan. Okay, so it's located in the present-day Sudan, and at least 5,500 years ago. Kerma is one of the largest archaeological sites in ancient Nubia. So maybe they went from there, went to the River Nile, etc., etc. Okay, look at the information and work it out through your personal research yourself. Don't take our word for it. Look at the established facts, the evidence that proves itself evident, and so forth. Okay, these are Kushite images. Look very Egyptian, don't they? That one does anyway. Who's he? pharaoh, one of the Kushite pharaohs. Interesting. Karnak temple. So, did it say here that their civilization fell apart, or their city or whatever, and then they moved to Egypt? Independent kingdom centered at Napata in modern northern Sudan. Yeah, they emerged possibly from Kerma and regained the region's independence from Egypt. With the disintegration of the new kingdom around 1070 BC, Kush became an independent kingdom centered at Napata, fourth cataract of the Nile. In modern northern Sudan, this more Egyptianized kingdom of Kush emerged, possibly from Kerma, and retained the region's independence from Egypt. Okay. Yeah, okay. Okay, so there's a north and south. Northern Kush seem to have been more productive and wealthier than the southern area. Yeah, southern area. Dental trait analysis of fossils dating from the Meroitic period in Semna. Okay, it's one of those four what's the word for that? 4 cataracts in northern Nubia in Egypt. Found that they displayed traits similar to those of populations inhabiting the Nile, Horn of Africa, and Maghreb, northwest Africa, in the Arab world. Okay. Traits from Mesolithic in southern Nubia around Meroe, however, indicated a closer affinity with other sub-Saharan dental records. It is indicative of a north-south gradient along the Nile. Okay. Okay, you have to look at that again and do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Okay, Herodotus mentions an invasion of Kush by the Achaemenid ruler Cambyses around 530 BC. Meroitic period and Ptolemaic period, Roman period, language and writing, technology, medicine and mathematics, military, and so forth. Interesting. Okay, so going back to this book, let's go a bit further in here. And what's this? Next is the Aryan group composed of the ancestors of the Hellenes, or the Greeks, Italians and Celts. That's what they were calling themselves before Hellenius, before they changed it to Greek. The Hellenic Achaeans were in the Peloponnesus in the 14th century BC, according to Egyptian monuments. They came into Greece by following the eastern coast of the Adriatic southward. And so forth. And he might go a racist here, this author, or he might be stating fact. Chapter 3, use your own discretion. The black race is not Adamites. Okay, I think the other word Adamites with the double A, perfected beings, maybe different. Maybe they were like beings created by the so-called, so-said gods of the universe, the planets and the Nibiru, whatever, coming down and creating these beings, perfected beings. Okay, something about Noah. comes to a interesting junction in the progress of the discussion. These Noachites everywhere found older people in possession of the land. Who were they? In Central Asia they bordered on the Mongolians. Who were they? On the south of the Hindu Kush they drove before them to the confines of the peninsula. The Aboriginal Dravidians. Who were they? In Greece the Hamitic Hypothesis drove out the cave-dwelling Cyclopes. Were they like one-eyed giants or something? Were they similar, or just the name, right, of actual real people? They didn't have one eye in the centre of their forehead and were 10 feet tall or anything like that. Who were they? In Italy and Spain, the Aryan Ligurians found and expelled the Iberians. Who were they? Everywhere, Iberians, Ligurians, Achaeans, Umbro-Latins, Celts and Scythians found a people who dwelt in caves, used stones, implements, and clothed themselves in the skins of beasts. Who were they? These Aborigines were everywhere people who we cannot trace to the sons of Noah. Yeah, if you have a look at the Genesis, the Brita, or Genesis in English translation video that we did, in Theory of the Aborigines by Victor N. Alexander, you'll see the difference there. It's not referring to Australian Aborigines, but these people who clung to indigenous instincts, culture, whatever, right, as he puts it. Okay, he chose to use that name. These Aborigines were everywhere people whom we cannot trace to the sons of Noah, because they were Neanderthal man, pre-Adamic. Between Adam and Noah's flood was an interval of 1656 years, 1656 years. Could these unknown peoples have ramified from the stock of Adam during their interval? What does that mean? That they interbred with them? And let's look in their faces and see if we can detect any affinity with the recognised sons of Adam. That's when Seth's descendants broke away from God. They left their rightful place, and then they interbred with the Neanderthal daughters of men, right? Because they were they began that line of children of God, right? And they left it, and then they interbred with those Neanderthal or ungodly line, and produced sons and daughters who became giants, strange, right? Probably freaks, because of the close proximity, both being human beings, but with slight differences, etc. Okay, strange creatures. Okay, first was the Dravidian race, possessed of the peninsula of India by the eastern branch of the Aryan family. Okay, so they remain distinct to the present day, and their characteristics agree with the representations which have been made of them from time to time in the progress of history. Their skins are dark, their hair is black and curly, their lips are intumescent, but their jaws are not prognathous, like those of the Negros. Is that like prominent or something? Or what? They still hold possession of a belt along the east coast of Hindustan, and even stretch far into the interior. They also retain a foothold upon the west coast and linger in Baluchistan. The northern half of Ceylon is also the seat of a numerous Dravidian population. One of their languages is the Tamil, spoken by 10 millions of people, and a repository of an ancient literature of surprising richness. These people are not the descendants of Noah. We may assume, however, that they are not so divergent from the types of the Noachian race. Noachian race is to preclude the admission that they may be descended from the same Adam. Let us grant that they may be Adamites. What shall we say of the Mongoloids? This vast race, forming 2/3 the population of the globe, spreads over all eastern and northern Asia and Arctic Europe. Because Genghis Khan, this king of the Mongols, conquered many people and had many sons and daughters, thousands of them apparently, because they're doing what? Going across the land, pillaging and raping and all that sort of stuff. So he had many descendants, over 1,000 or something like that. according to the histories. It possesses the Japanese islands and so forth, and many other islands of Polynesia. The Chinese and Tatars and Malays belong here, as well as the Siberian tribes and the Finns and Lapps of Europe and so forth. Okay, so no race save the Mediterranean has ever had dispersion at all comparable. Can these be cousins of the Noachites and brethren of the Dravida? Are these the sons of Adam? The dusky Dravida could not well disown relationship on the score of complexion with the dusky Malay and so forth. But the Dravidian's curly hair reveals little affinity with the straight, coarse hair of the Mongoloid, and the latter's high cheekbones and generally obliquely set eyes wedge the races apart so far that we feel a little incredulity respecting the claim that the antediluvian period of less than 2,000 years could have marked them with such disparity and so forth. Okay, he goes on about compare this fact with what he's on about 4,000 years. The three families of Noachites constitute still, after a lapse of more than 4,000 years, but a single race. Compare this fact with the differentiation of black men into four properly characterized races, and we have at once a fact bearing on the antiquities of the black races. These races are 1. Negroes, Hottentots and Bushmen, Papuans, Australians. Besides their black skins, they all have narrow heads. And here it is in the Latin or something. A colour which the old Hebrew would have called red or ruddy. He feels himself very ignorant of the meaning of terms. Anthropologically, colour possesses less significance than the meaning of the term Adam. It is confessed one of the less constant characteristics of race. But the strict interpretation of Scripture is very often insisted on or upon, and in this case he would like to pin the strict constructionists to their chosen method, because the strict construction, as will be shown, is the one which corresponds with the entire range of facts. Okay, and he goes on about the Nego pre-Adamic. Okay. That's quite interesting. Okay. His peers, etc., said that he was a racist. He had racist connotations, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, probably throughout this book, we haven't really gone deep into it. It's probably a big ass book. Okay, so I'd had to spend a lot of time going over it again and pinpoint those, highlight those. Okay, probably better if you wanted to, is to read that book for yourself. You could find it on archive.org. Just look for Adamites and pre-Adamites, that book, and take it from there.